I was like, why doesn't this work?
You obviously were not happy to just let things go.
I was better at treating the system than treating patients. Like generally that's what I was drawn to.
Being able to understand that two things can be right.
I've always had within me the ability to know fully that two things can be true at the same time.
I think I agree with that. So lovely to have you, James. And again, like I was saying, I'm loving the studio, loving the bit of a mystery dark in the background. And thanks for jumping on the podcast with me.
You're very welcome, mate. You're very welcome. It's funny that you say studio. Everyone thinks this is like a full studio. If you are watching this on video, it definitely looks like I'm in a studio. But sometimes I'll put people on my phone camera and I'll show you that like this is only paneled to where you can see. So the rest of the room is this like horrible yellow color that like is just it's somewhere between yellow and green. It's not a very good part of the color palette, to be honest. But it's the rest of the room looks like that and it's a complete mess. But as long as the bit that you can see looks good, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean it's 2024. This is health content creation in 2024. You'd have my little one out there and then have a nasty out there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've got 100 questions to ask you, but I suppose because we've got limited time, I'm just going to jump straight to it. If you've joined us today, I've got a very interesting, very impressive guest, James X. His full name is James Somauroo, and he's the CEO of SOMX, which is a health tech media company. I'll say is one of the leading, I don't know too many others, one of the leading health tech media companies in UK and Europe, and you do great work. So welcome to the Moneywise Doctor podcast.
Thank you, man. Yeah, delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Lovely. Before the cameras or maybe the audio started rolling, I was about to get some details and I thought, no, we'll save it for the cameras. And you're CEO of SOMX. Is a real company. It's not just on LinkedIn and it's not just online. It's a real company.
That shows how much you work with startups, man, that you have to be cynical if it's even a real company. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Speak to a lot of people before they've incorporated, do you? So yeah.
You sort of making me want to jump into it straight away now when you talk about startups. But yeah, it's a real company, real people with real wages and salaries, doing real work and making a real difference. That's amazing what you've built from the scratch, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, it's no mean feat. It's hard building a real thing with real people, real wages. You're right. Yeah, and it's funny because you get all these functions creep in that once upon a time took you 5 minutes to reconcile your invoices or chat to the accountants about the annual accounts. Like there weren't really that many transactions, so there's not really any accounts to really talk about. Whereas now, actually, we do about $1 million in revenue a year, and
nice.
There's a lot of there's more money, more problems, mate. Is all I can say.
There's a bit more complexity.
Yeah. It is a bit more complex. Yeah, it is.
But that's grand. That's amazing. I mean, having come to that point, one of the things I admire, basically, we've got a lot of doctors who've come on the podcast, and it's really quite interesting and impressive to see a doctor who's been able to shift from traditional medicine and go into some other area. I know I've mentioned you've got a real company, so the big question I want to start with, James, is: are you a real doctor? This is how to get financially smarter in just 5 minutes. Sometimes the difference between making smarter financial decisions and costly, horrible financial mistakes is having the right information at the right time for the right person. So every week I write the Moneywise Doctor weekly newsletter. It's an email newsletter packed full with valuable financial insights and updates to help you make smarter financial decisions and avoid costly mistakes. Some of the areas I've been covering over the last 70 weeks include actionable tips on tax strategies, pensions, investing, side hustles, and several other financial areas. Now, join thousands of medics who subscribe to the Moneywise Doctor weekly newsletter to receive it straight to your inbox, and it's totally free. Don't miss out. Subscribe now using the link in the description. And now let's jump right back to the episode.
I would say not anymore. That's probably the most accurate way of saying it. So I was an anesthetics and intensive care doctor. So I got to the end of core anesthetic training. And it was at the end of core training that I made my exit, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went to medical school in Nottingham, did my F1, F2 in London. Yeah, nice. Did my F1, F2 in London, and then went up to, or lived in Liverpool, but actually did my anaesthetics training in North Wales, hospital called Wrexham, which was it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun those 2 years. A lot of fun those 2 years. Liverpool's an incredible place to live for any of your listeners that have ever been there or gone on a night out there, maybe, or lived there.
Liverpool is crazy, like the ultimate club in city.
Special place in my heart for Liverpool forever because of those couple of years. But yeah, then I guess you could say my ambition got the better of me, and I found my way back to London. Worked in policy for a couple of years. Went to health education England, went to NHS England. I'd worked at the BMJ previously as well. And then, started working at the Digital Health London Accelerator, helping a load of startups. Started my own accelerator after that with a guy called Alex. We did that for a few cohorts, was raising a fund. So we were going to become VCs. And then that got, COVID really punched that in the face. But ultimately, I think we both fell out of love with the idea anyway. In the meantime, so it's funny how some things work out like that. But at the same time, I had the idea for SOMX. I was working with so many different startups through the accelerators. They all seem to have the same problem, which was communications, marketing, PR support, with those agencies not being specialized in health tech and biotech, and therefore not understanding the language. What we hear from people all the time is like, we have to teach them about health tech for 6 months, and then we spend 6 months watching them under deliver, and then I'm 12 months out of pocket, and I've got far less budget, and I still need to solve the problem. So it was fortunate. I was doing a lot of my own content, obviously had the podcast, starting the newsletter, writing a lot on LinkedIn, and obviously for Forbes at the time as well, I was writing for. And so I was creating a lot of content, and so from a content perspective, that was great. And then my girlfriend at the time, now wife, Jessica, was in Press and PR, a global agency for big medical device, big pharma clients. And so the two of us basically put our heads together and said, hey, there's definitely a business here. And working with startups quite a lot, I had quite a high bar for what a good idea was, and I really tried and tested this idea with people, because I was like, I don't want to have like this long list of failed businesses behind me. I certainly don't want to raise any money and put myself in that situation, because whilst being an entrepreneur, I'm actually quite risk averse, if anything. So I never felt comfortable raising money to build something that might or might not work. That for me personally, it doesn't seem like a good idea, but for plenty it does, and for plenty it does work, and create a fantastic life doing that sort of stuff. But it just wouldn't have floated my boat. So the services business, revenue and profit from day one was really appealing, and so we put the idea together, and bootstrapped it, put the idea together. And fortunately, obviously having a network of potential clients, I could ask a lot of them, like, hey, would you come in for this amount if we did this thing for you, heavily discount it, just give me loads of feedback. 4 people said yes, so we launched, and the rest is history. But growing a business is a whole nother one that I can talk for you for a few hours about. But that's how it all started, man. That's how it all started.
We've only got a few minutes into the podcast, and I feel like you've already dropped a masterclass here, James.
I don't know. That's just the history, man.
There's so much to unpack here, and I feel like I've already gotten the promise of the podcast, the reward already. First of all, shout out to University of Nottingham. That was my first time in the UK, where I did my master's in international health.
Excellent.
I think it's great. All the Cambridge and Oxford, they're fantastic. Not taking nothing away from them, but I seem to be getting all the innovators seem to be coming from University of Nottingham. I wonder if there's anything on campus. I know I've had a few on my podcast. The most recent was Abena. She's been in Nottingham as well. Shout out to Nottingham, and fantastic work you and Jess are doing. Basically, I'll just start from one way. You mentioned entrepreneurs being, you're an entrepreneur, but you're risk adverse. I think a lot of times, if you're not raising money and you're bootstrapping, then every penny matters, every dollar matters, and beyond the penny and the dollar, basically your time as well. You're, I think we're about the same age now. You're 38. You look young for that age, actually.
That's my skincare routine. We could talk about that as well. Get ready with me, etc.
All right. maybe that might be an opportunity for a business, maybe skin analytics or something like that. Yeah, but yeah, you're looking good for 38. But basically, you found an idea. But answering my first question, you're already working as a doctor, not just a doctor, but a doctor. You've gone to the end of your core training and aesthetics, so you're quite deep in it. But sort of like, what led you to start thinking outside the box? Basically, you're like an OG in health tech now. You've been doing it for a long time, even before it was popular. I think I'm the only doctor that's not in health tech. But even before it was so popular, what led you to think, well, rather than just finish, become an aesthetic consultant, can earn quite a good money? What was the driving force? What was the real motive behind it?
Great question. For me, I got here through quality improvement projects.
QI.
Yeah, exactly. QIs or quips, all that sort of stuff. So what it was, the first job that I had was, I was an F1 and it was liaison psychiatry. That was my first job, which basically means, for those that don't know, you are the in-house psychiatrist to a hospital. So you sort of run around the medical and surgical patients on the wards, and you give, I guess, I don't know how you describe it, like ambulatory psychiatry advice and stuff, and prescriptions or whatever. So you see a lot of delirium, you see a lot of anxiety, depression, you see some psychosis. So it was quite interesting from that regard, but it wasn't that busy. So I had a lot of time just sat in the psychiatry office, just waiting for these kind of referrals to go in, because you don't have inpatients and you don't have like an exhaustive list of like diagnostic tests or anything like that. Broadly, you go and see someone, it takes, can take a couple or a few hours once you do see them and try and get all the information out of them. But so much time just sort of sat wandering the corridors of the hospital, really, just like chatting to my fellow F1s and help sticking in the odd cannula where I can, just to keep my skills up, even though I was petrified of doing that by the end of my liaison psychiatry rotation. Anyway, I had a lot of time, so I could get a sense of like how the hospital ran, because I would see a lot of the different F1s and like all the different departments, and the way my brain works is that I do sort of see and I feel things in like shapes and weird sort of abstract nature, so I could sort of sense and feel almost palpably like where these parts of the hospital were that weren't really working that well. And so a really obvious one was, we just had loads and loads and loads of discharge summaries just piling up in the doctor's mess for just discharges that had happened. So again, people that don't know, once you get discharged from hospital, your notes at this hospital anyway got sent to the doctor's mess. A doctor would then just have to read the notes, figure out what happened, write a letter to the GP in a form, and then that goes off. So the GP knows why you got discharged. Anyway, these people getting discharged, and weeks and weeks and weeks was going by, and these discharge summaries weren't being done. So the GPs were getting really angry. They were phoning in, being like, where on earth is this stuff? And so I wanted to solve this problem, because by this point I'm now on MAU. I'm actually the F1 that's writing the most amount of discharge summaries. So now this is really my problem, and I'm like, this is just the sticking point of the whole system. This is the link between the hospital and community care. There's GPs not knowing what's going on. There's medication changes. There's reasons for things that have happened that they just now don't know. So I can just feel this tension of like the whole healthcare system is just way worse because of this massive pile of discharge summaries that reaches the ceiling. So I was like, why doesn't this work? And so it's because the computer takes 7.5 minutes to load when you turn it on. So no one wants to turn the computer. No one wants to turn the computer on. Exactly. Of course, and it's funny that it's interesting that you laugh, right? It is funny, like, but
it's crazy.
This is the reality. There's a harsh reality to like why problems actually are what they are in a hospital. Absolutely. And a computer that takes 7.5 minutes to load once you turn it on is a real serious issue, because nobody wants to turn the computer on. Once it's on, it's slow. Once you load up the discharge summary form, it has loads of information that's completely superfluous and just isn't needed. Like, we had to do a whole page for heart failure, even if the patient was normal. We had to fill in just all these like random like metrics. All the blood results have to go in, like all this sort of stuff. And me just thinking like, how on earth do I solve this problem? Like, I ended up speaking to GP. I rang a few GPs and I was like, what do you actually want to know? And they were like, really? Well, all we need to know is what they came in with, what they went out with, and if there's any medication changes and why. And it was like, well, cool. Can all this just be replaced by like a white box? And it was like, yes. Right,
Okay.
now we're getting somewhere. So got in a room, a few different people, like IT, some consultants, some F1s, some, just some people from the hospital. Just got everyone in a room and a couple of GPs and just said,
you obviously were not happy to just let things go. They were,
dog with a bone. Yeah. Just
yeah.
so tenacious, like to solve these problems. Yeah.
So when you say we got a few people in the room, what does that mean? You were a junior doctor then, well, resident doctor, as we call it now. You were like F1 or F2 then. Obviously, not the most powerful person in the team, but
no.
in a position to drive change because you were curious and you were observing it.
Yeah. But
so
the thing
how
is
did
as
you
well,
get
man,
these people in the group?
Yeah. So I think anyone that achieves anything never does it alone. And I think that's the thing. You have to find people that are going to help you either with introductions or with leverage or with just however you can get help, right? At the time, I had a consultant on MAU that was really bought into solving this problem. So what it was is that whenever what was going to solve this problem was essentially getting all the relatively senior people in the room to just listen to the GPs who would say the same thing as said to me. Just a white box space with these three things in it. That's all we want. That's all we need. But you also need the IT person there to be able to then go, cool, can you just execute on that, please? Yeah, fine. You also need the consultants to be like, yeah, okay, we're happy with that as well. So you sort of need buy-in from all sorts of people. That's what my consultant at MAU gave me. So he was sort of bought into solving this problem, was happy to use his name and his leverage in order to then make this happen. Because you're absolutely right. One of the most common feelings for me as an F1 was just the powerlessness. The nature of feeling like just feeling so powerless, but also being the most connected person on the ground floor to notice what needs solving, other than like other allied health professionals who also put hands on patients and are on the ground floor, who also have, by the way, a pretty flawless knowledge of like what should actually change and why, which is why, again, strength in numbers, bottom up demand, like the more of those people that you can get on board with you that put hands on patients as well, like ideal, because together you can be a serious force. And the many against the few to get things done, like all of that sort of stuff rings true. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff I do. So I would take quality improvement projects, but then I'd push them into like a business case, because I'd actually want something to happen. I would never do quality improvement projects that just sat on a shelf. That just didn't interest me.
Right.
And so the best thing that I did ever, I've told this story a few times, but like the best thing that I ever did was follow a blood culture to see what happens to it.
Okay.
I was on neonates. Fantastic job.
Yeah.
I was the F2, so you're the youngest of the SHOs. You're not really an SHO yet, so it's an interesting time. Anyway, used to do this ward round on special care, which was on a Friday, and you basically have to go around all the babies that were born overnight with suspected sepsis. So if they might have had an infection, that's because there was meconium at birth, or a difficult delivery, or cord around the neck, like whatever it is that contributed to this picture that this baby might be septic. So they have blood cultures taken at birth, and then you're home at the time. Anyway, I think NICE guidance has changed now, but at the time you'd have 48 hours of antibiotics, home if cultures were negative. So home if your blood test's okay. But the blood test would never come back after 48 hours. So what I did was, on a day that the pods were down, which is like the chutes that shoot the bloods through the hospital. I just followed a blood culture to see like what happens to it. So the guy picked it up, took it to the lab, knocked on the lab door, like, hey, what happens to these blood cultures overnight? Why are some of these coming back on time? Why are some of them not? Like, what's going on? And they said, hey, well, it's because overnight, 5:01 p.m., basically all the pods drop into a basket, and then they just accumulate all the way overnight. So the baby born at 8:59 a.m., theirs goes on the top. Now, the way that we incubate those is that we take them from the top and then start working on them. So the poor baby that's born at 5:01 p.m. is actually worse off. But the point is that they, those ones they've had 12 hours of not being anything done to them. So anyway, wrote this business case that was like, look, I actually shadowed someone in finance to learn how to write a business case, and like, there was this thing called the KSS School of Clinical Leadership at the time, which was amazing because I applied for this thing and they paired me with someone in finance. We shadowed each other, so we learned stuff from each other. And that was an amazing initiative, incredible initiative. I don't think it exists anymore. This was incredible initiative.
This was in your F2.
It's an F2, yeah. So then I worked with Linda, who helped me write this business case. We wrote it together, and basically said you can courier the blood to the nearest place overnight, or you can lease a new blood culture analyzer, stick it on the neonates ward, put discharge dependent bloods in it. You'd save 90 grand in year one, 200 grand in year two in perpetuity. So that was a business case that we wrote. And again, like it was so cool to like see this through to like, hey, here's something that can solve the problem. Interesting thing though, like the clinical director pulled me aside and said, hey, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. I've got PhD students that, you know, can't like won't do this sort of stuff. It's amazing. But the problem is I can't do it because I've got a half empty neonates unit. And if I discharge people any quicker, then it'll look bad and we'll lose money and like all sorts of stuff. So loads of you learn about perverse incentives in the system and like all these things. So it was like just super interesting. But this, in answer to your question, like originally, like how did I get into all of this stuff? It was through this. I'd find a problem, I'd pull at the thread long enough to see what the potential solution was. And in this case, for example, it was a blood culture analyzer. So I'd end up speaking to blood. I mean, it didn't in this case, but like I'd speak to blood culture analyzer companies, and then I'd, you know, learn what they would need to then get this deal done. And I'd then work both sides and say, hey, you've got this company coming in. Here's what I'd ask them. I'd work on this side, say, hey, you guys need to say this in the meeting. If you want it to work, you need to speak in bed days. And so I was ended up as being this sort of communications consultant anyway for like some of the stuff that I was trying to do. But broadly, I was just interested in tech, right? So I was reaching out to tech startups anyway, just asking them stuff and just learning things that way. But I would also just, you know, help out where I could, saying, hey, I've looked at your website. You might benefit from saying this on your website. Like, this is the way that we talk in the hospital about this problem. And so that side of things was always interesting to me. I was better at treating the system than treating patients. Like, generally, that's what I was drawn to. Because I was just so frustrated because I was just spread so thin as a clinician that I couldn't deliver the standard of care that I wanted to. And that consistently frustrated me to a point where I'd then work even more to then try and change the system so that I'd need to work less. And this is the perverse thing with me. It's the same running a business and trying to optimize stuff in the business. I will work all night so that I don't have to repeat work or do extra work. So I end up, I'm in this constant state of like, working to this eventual magical made up day where all of this comes together and then everything runs autonomously, which is just it's a false economy, mate. Honestly, it's false economy, but
this
it does lead to some growth.
I felt a little bit like I was drinking from a hose there, and I loved it. Look, let's start from not perverse incentives. Basically, what you've demonstrated clearly in the last couple of minutes is how entrepreneurs think. Because lots of people I've talked to started business or invested in their business. People think that entrepreneurs start a business because they really want to make money, and obviously that's a good reward. That's capitalism. But a lot of times I see curiosity, like a thread of curiosity. Everything you've described. When I worked in psych, so I worked a bit in psych in London privately when I was a student. Doing my master's. So I worked in Priory, and then I worked in psych during my rotations as a GP. I just remember the computers that'll take forever to land. And then on the other side, as a salary GP, receiving discharge summaries that are like several pages long. I don't really care about this. I just want to see like 5 things. I've got 2,500 patients. So it's amazing that you've taken something like that most people will sort of like overlook and then pull the thread and see where it's got to you. I know you've mentioned something about optimizing, building in leverage and all that, because it seems like your approach has been find a problem, try to get to the bottom of a problem, and then building some sort of incentive and leverage to make it work. Because you obviously mentioned you don't mind working all day, all night, because you're trying to build something, but all work is not equal. You're building something that could then do more work, which is like leverage and all that. So basically, your entry into health tech and sort of like doing the communication bit, because obviously a lot of software programmers, engineers, they are builders, but they're not always the top communicators. You still remember how you landed your first paying client? I mean, you've done a lot of free work already from what you described for the NHS and outside the NHS. How did you land your first paying client? This could save you several thousands of pounds, not just in your taxes and pensions. Have you fallen into the 60% tax trap as a doctor or healthcare professional without even knowing? It's crazy. I know you think the highest tax you can pay is 45%, but here's how it works. If your income exceeds 100,000, you start to lose your personal tax allowance, and by the time you hit about 125,000, you've lost your entire tax allowance. This means you're paying an effective tax rate of 60%. That's not good. You lose a lot of other benefits with it. Now, if it's something you've never thought about or you're worried, you're not sure how to navigate it, you're in luck, because I've written a very clear guide with a 10-point checklist that you can use to avoid the 60% tax trap. One of the biggest ones is obviously paying more into your pension, but there are 9 other steps you can take. Check the link in the description and download it for free. Let me know if it helps. Let's jump right back into the episode.
I can say my first paying gig in health tech, actually. So one of the best decisions that I ever made, and one of the most lucky and fortunate I've ever been, was when I applied to the FMLM's leadership scheme. At the time, it was the Bruce Keogh scheme, but it's the National Medical Directors Clinical Fellowship scheme. So I applied for that. I managed to get it, and that took me to policy. So that took me, I got placed at Health Education England for a year, and I worked there for a year and started to learn and understand the back end of healthcare, the arm's length bodies, the ALBs, the NHS England's, the Health Education England's, but then also like NICE and the CQC, and we had there was like 30 fellows, and we were all across all of these things,
right?
And we had like a joint WhatsApp group, and we'd have joint socials together, and we'd meet up, and we'd have these like dinners where we'd have like a big speaker that we'd say like, hey, we're these 30 doctors across all these places, like we'd get like the head of the civil service and all this sort of stuff to come and do an after dinner talk for us, and like it was amazing. And so we would do like all of this sort of stuff, and because of that, there was we all had a WhatsApp group. Someone just put in the WhatsApp group one day, like, because we're approaching the end of the fellowship, someone just put a job for the Digital Health London Accelerator, right? They were looking for something called an NHS Navigator, and so I looked at the job description and I was like, hey, it's pretty vague, it's pretty broad, like I think I've got a decent skill set here, and like applied for that, got it. And I think that was when I was in health tech, because I was at an accelerator. And for those that don't know, an accelerator is a program that supports startups. So in exchange for sometimes fees, sometimes equity, sometimes like lots of different things, but sometimes they're also free. This one was free, for example, because it was funded by NHS England and the European Union at the time. The accelerator gives support, guidance, introductions, this, that, and the other. Now you can debate how useful these things are, and they're useful for some and not others. Like that's the harsh reality of it. And I think one of the problems with accelerators as well is that they're not a democracy, because the startups on it are actually all in competition with each other for attention, and whoever's doing the best is then going to get the most attention, because that's going to deliver the so there's problems with accelerators. But anyway, that was my first gig in health tech as an NHS navigator. I had 10 startups that I looked after in inverted commas, and it was my job to make sure that they got the most out of the accelerator. And like I although we were funded by NHS England and the European Union at the time, and we had metrics associated with like hours of support we gave to them, and like research collaborations and all this sort of stuff, I always considered it my role. I considered it my responsibility to be to the startups. So I always felt that they've applied, they've given their time, and so I'm just going to make sure that whatever they want and need, I'm just going to try and do it, whether it contributes to these metrics or not.
I'm not.
I think that's what gave me a reputation of just being someone who just like got things done, or like tried at least, or whatever it was. And I think that was observed. And so me and someone called Hannah, who was another navigator at the time, when Jenny, our boss, went on maternity leave, we got promoted to run the program. So now we've got exposure to running an accelerator, which is really interesting. You learn how to run it, and you learn what the component parts are, and you learn about leadership, and you learn about the health innovation networks that were running at the time, the 3 in London. And so you got more of an understanding of that, and how the whole system fits together. And then started my own accelerator after that, just by understanding the model and knowing where I think I can support, like not competing with that accelerator, but actually an earlier stage accelerator for individuals with ideas, like an entrepreneur first for health tech is kind of what we did for 3 or 4 cohorts. So that's how that all kicked off. And then obviously from there you realize that their major problem is marketing, and then I flip into marketing and communications and solve that quite specifically. But because of that history, in terms of our first paying client, it was as entrepreneurship goes and starting businesses goes, it was relatively straightforward. And I think this is the thing with businesses, is that very rarely does anyone, I think on my podcast of like 400 episodes, only one person has ever said there was 400. A light bulb moment. About 400 I've recorded. Like only one person has ever said there was like a light bulb moment where just the light went off and it was like, I've got it. Everyone else has said they basically stared at the same problem for years, and then eventually they're like, oh, maybe this thing might be it, and they iterate their way into something, and then they keep iterating once they've started, and then eventually they get to something. And I think that's the reality of it, is that I've stared at the wall at this point for 10 years.
Yeah,
I know I've known this problem with startups maybe for 4 or 5 or 6ish, and like, so it's that I saw the need and the gap over time. It wasn't like, hey, I know, like, I've not doing anything else. I've just popped over here and realized there's like a need for a marketing agency, a communications agency that's specific in health tech and biotech. It's not realistic. So to put for entrepreneurs or for people to put pressure on themselves for like the idea, you know, I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to think of the idea. Trust me, that's not where the ideas are. The ideas are within this web of messy nonsense of problems that everyone has, and you need to pull that thread of that problem and just keep asking why is that a problem, why is that an issue, and then whatever they say, investigate that, and eventually get to the point where you're like, it's because something is missing, and then you create that. Like that is essentially my guide. That's not the opposite to, you know, light bulb moment, and gives you a bit of inspiration, I guess. And just to take the pressure off yourself, like you can't just sit around. You're not going to find the idea when you're not exploring. So yeah, that's how it all started. So as I say, I already knew a lot of people. I knew people with the exact problem. I then was able to turn around to those exact people who had the exact problem, who I knew, and just said, hey, I'm starting this thing, and then iterated with them what I thought the model should be in a very open forum. And that's how we got our first 4 clients. Like, just 4 people initially said yes.
Wow. That is amazing. I mean, I like is the non-LinkedIn version, right? The LinkedIn version makes it look like I was just taking a walk. Like, I was taking a walk this morning, and then it struck me like, Eureka, I've got this bright idea. But you and I know it's often messy, and it's hard to come upon something if you haven't actually been thinking about it. I mean,
especially in health and science, man. Especially in health tech and biotech, because like, look, the health tech and biotech, like a huge thing is like tech transfer. So people go to universities, they do academic research, which is quite literally staring at something for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then deciding, this thing is gonna work, which we've just discovered. Now let's try and commercialize it, right? So it's not as if there's just loads of just nascent ideas just knocking around that you're just going to bump into. No. These are like academic researchers that are searching specifically at this one receptor or protein or whatever it is to figure out, there might be something here, and then they discover. So that's a good analogy for it, is that those people aren't just like thinking in their room and then all of a sudden they're like, I wonder if, and then, you know, it's not the reality of starting a business. It's the reality of having an idea, maybe sometimes, but I would even argue that the ideas come through the exploration and actually going and doing and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. I think I agree with that. A lot of times it requires a bit of messing about, iteration, testing it in the market. And for you, in your own situation, you had the great opportunity which you took to come out from being a clog in the system, because that's the trouble a lot of doctors struggle with, right? They're working in a role, they're a consultant or a GP or a registrar, and they can only see a little box. They're seeing what they're doing. And when they think about starting a business or leaving medicine to do something, sometimes they have the same type of thinking, but you've had a system type of thinking. Your training, being able to go to the accelerators. And like, I totally agree. Not every accelerator is going to be Y Combinator. Not everybody who goes to an accelerator. And shout out to my friends in accelerators. I do get inboxes and talk to some of them. One of my mates just got into Techstars 6 months ago.
Nice.
Nice. But not everyone goes to an accelerator is going to turn out that great. But the fact that you were in a position where you were seeing from a systemic point of view, you've seen the both sides. You've worked as a clinician for a long time. Then you've also worked in policy. You've worked in health tech. You've spoken to entrepreneurs. That sort of like gave you an overall approach to the system.
I had a lot of different vantage points, is the way that I describe it. I've seen the same thing from a few different angles, and I think that's ultimately why I've been good at communications. I think that's why communications I've been a bit of a duck to water when I eventually found like, hey, maybe it's communications I'm good at here. And I think that's the thing. You know, I'm mixed race as my sort of heritage, I guess, and so I've always had within me the ability to know fully that two things can be true at the same time. I've always known that. I've always known that because I am both. I am two things. I'm not half this and half that. I am both, and that's how I see myself. So I'm sort of a living version of how two things can be true at the same time, and it can be awkward that because we want to see things mathematically as like 1 + 1 = 2.
The world doesn't work like that.
0.5 = 1, yeah, but the world doesn't work like that. And I think that seeing the same thing from a few different vantage points has enabled me to have so much more empathy for people and understanding that I can know and appreciate how certain messages are going to land with certain audiences because I've been on their side of the table. So I did clinical medicine. I spent time with finance managers, so NHS management. So the whole manager, them and us, they see us as just a number. They get to go home at 5. By the way, they do see you as a number because it's really
that's
efficient.
their job.
And they do go home at 5 because that's the job and life they chose.
Yeah,
you chose one that didn't. So
exactly.
come on. So there's that. There's the tech side, the technologist side, spending time with startups. There's the accelerator side, managing all the tech startups. There's the NHS England. There's health education. There's the arm's length bodies. There's all these different sides that I've seen healthcare, I guess. And so I can, when startups have goals that relate to raising a fund, I've met a lot of different LPs and VCs, and so I've spent time in that world as well, having run accelerators as well, spending a lot of time with VCs, so the investment world. So when startups have got goals that are like to get investment or to get certain customers, be those NHS or private, or be those employers or this or that, whatever their business model is, or whether they want to get partners or whether they want to get here or there. Generally, I can pull on some sort of experience of being either on that side of the table or very close to someone on that side of the table, or I'm able to literally go into my network and find someone and ask them questions. So I think ultimately that's been my strength, is that having constantly seen healthcare from loads of different situations, it then translates really directly. And it's funny. So like just before I jumped on this call, I saw that Avi's just done a post on like some report that's talking about healthcare data, right? And he posted the report, and it's got a load of recommendations in there. So like if we're going to utilize our data properly, we're going to unify. It's about unifying data. So we're going to unify this data and use it effectively. NHS England's got to do this. This organization's got to do this. This organization's got to do this. And those are the recommendations. It was commissioned by, I think, the Chief Medical Officer in the UK. And it's interesting because like I know how reports like that get written. And I know what happens now. Like those recommendations then go to those organizations, and those organizations have a choice of whether they respond or not. And if they are going to respond, they need to say that, okay, we take the recommendations of the Chief Medical Officer's report about unifying data, and we suggest we're going to do this, and we suggest others do that, and then it becomes like, so I can sort of see how like these things are going to work. And so I say to startups all the time, like based on my work on policy, like whatever reports are out of late, at my time it was like the 5-year forward view, the GP forward view, this, that, and the other. I just used to say to people, like, just skip all the way to the recommendations and just have a slide in your deck that just says which of the recommendations you are doing and progressing and part of, and that you support based on what you do, so that you can end by saying to an NHS audience, oh, and by the way, we meet recommendations 14, 15, 17, 24, and 35 of the GP forward view because of this, and there's a matrix here which shows exactly which bits of our product map to which bit. And all of a sudden, like any NHS person in the room, in any sort of position of power in like NHS management or leadership or whatever, would just go, oh, they get it. That's interesting. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that. But that's just giving you an example of like how very, very, very practically I think experience on different sides like matters. Because again, that's the same thing with investors. Like, oh, we've got a meeting with this investor at this time to talk about this thing. Like, oh, are you raising at the minute? Yeah, we're raising our Series A, but we're not raising it for another 12 months or whatever. And it's like, is it a good idea? Well, yes, it is a good idea. Do you just want to meet them and for whatever reason. Or sometimes it's not a good idea because actually if you go up and, they're really keen to offload some of their cash and you're not ready for it, it might be wasting it. So there's lots of advantages to knowing all those different sides of the world, I would say, in communications, because I don't know how on earth a generic generalist marketing firm would be able to give this sort of advice to clients about health tech stuff.
Never, ever. I mean, you've mentioned mentioned something really important. So I did a job for Cornwall when I was GP. I did some health
Yeah.
policy work for Cornwall, where I trained, which is absolutely lovely. I think everyone should, well, not everyone. Devon and Cornwall is quite lovely. That's where I stay. This thing you mentioned about 5-year forward view, that thought will never ever come. I mean, maybe it might come if they had someone on the team who worked in the NHS, but having something like that, like a recommendations, if you put it in your slide deck, you're actually saying, look, okay, you're speaking my language now. That's what's important to me.
Language, yeah.
You know, because someone generic might be thinking things like, okay, this is your return on investment. This is how it's going to save you money, which is important and it's great. But maybe there are other things that matter to the managers you're speaking to the decision maker, like looking good, like looking like they're achieving the goals that were setting. But you did hit on a very big issue, a very important topic, which as an investor is something I have to deal with, is being able to hold two opposing viewpoints, or being able to understand that two things can be right at the same time and be opposite. I'm quite fascinated with Rory. I don't know if you know Rory Sutherland.
Rory Sutherland,
yeah,
the opposite of a good idea can still be a good idea.
I love him. Yeah, I love him. I love his style of thinking. So that's something you've mentioned here. Obviously, you are biracial. You've got like two heritage. So you're two of one. You're not like half of this and half of that. I think it's safe to think that I'm black and I haven't got like two. Yeah, but I'm an immigrant and then I'm British. I'm Nigerian, but I'm also British at the same time.
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an investor. I've been an employee. I've been a JP. Then I've worked outside medicine. So being able to see things from different aspects, I would say that seems to be like a superpower that you have as a company, because you're now in a sort of like will I say a class of one. You're not, there will be competition who do what you do, but you basically have created that class of one, being able to see things from different aspects. That leads me to a different pair of eyes you have, not your glasses now, and that's Jessica, your partner, your wife. Congratulations, you got married this year. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So it's quite a power couple thing, isn't it? You've come from being a doctor, the clinical background, the policy and all that. And she's come from this amazing, is that advertisement, the media company? So,
communications. It's a communications agency, so
I mean, to be honest, for the uninitiated and for someone outside industry, health promotion, communication, behavioral change, communication, advertisement, sales copy, I tend to lump them all in. I'm trying to get someone to change what they're doing. And if it's a sales letter or a good copywriting, you can apply the same thing in public health to get somebody to decide to wash their hands, then why not telling stories? So that's amazing. So you and obviously your wife are running this business, and I read one of the amazing articles you wrote in 2022. I didn't find it till 2024. That's how slow I am. And it's on LinkedIn. You talked about 56 things.
Oh yes,
like
56 things I've learned. Yeah.
And one of them was about working with if you're going to work with your partner. There are some nuances there. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How did you guys start together at the same time, or along the line you thought, look, let's run this company? Yeah, you mentioned you guys thought there was an opportunity there.
Yeah.
What are the practicalities? Do you have to divide roles to say, look, I do everything communication, you stay with the clinical, talk about protons and genomes and
yeah, I mean, look, naturally we have very different roles. So the thing that I would say, working with my partner in love and life and business, is that first of all, I couldn't do any of this without her.
Yep.
Because we are very good co-founders.
Fantastic.
Because we have complementary skills.
Absolutely.
As you've quite rightly pointed out, I have a medical background and know and more and understand content. I'm a domain expert in healthcare. I was doing more on the practical modern side of content, the sort of new media stuff of podcasts and Substacks and all that sort of stuff. And Jessica knows how to grow an agency. She knows the hiring structure. She knows about billable and non-billable and time tracking. And, all of these things I had absolutely no idea about. But she also knows how to deliver for a client. So she knows client delivery. Yep. Now, again, that is a whole art and a science combined as well, client delivery. And I had some idea of this from being at the Accelerator. I was basically an account manager at the Accelerator, to be honest. I was account manager for 10 startups and then got...
Yeah, that's what you described.
Director. So sort of like account management. Yeah. So I had some idea, but not to the extent of knowing how to do it within a communications agency. And so the reality is, like, we're very good co-founders from that regard. And so part of all of this is acknowledging that if we'd just met randomly on the street, we'd have been very good co-founders together. Now, when you add in the relationship side of things, the marriage side of things, it gets interesting, because I would say that it's changed through time, definitely. That it's been way more difficult than it is now, because now we've grown to a point where our roles are very separate. We have very, very, very separate roles in what we do.
Yeah.
And so we have different offices in the house. We meet for lunch. We,
Nice.
all of
You've got to
these
schedule
things.
it.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me that, like, it's and I get it, but most people, you haven't done this, but most people ask the question with, like, you must argue all the time, as like the sort of baseline way that they ask the question. And a lot of people do it in jest or whatever. And look, don't get me wrong, there are some more heated discussions than others. But I would say that because of the fact we live together, we're in a relationship together, we're married, the way that we can communicate gets straight to truth. We can go straight to truth.
There's no messing about.
Exactly. You don't have to mess about. So the speed that we can go is unbelievably fast. We can go unbelievably fast, because actually, in part, people talk about work-life balance. It's less that. It's just, this is just life for us. This just is our life. And so we can just talk. Some of it's hobby, some of it's interesting, some of it's fun, some of it's nice, some of it's cool. So, like, we'll have, like, discussions over the dinner table about, like, this business development person coming in, like, they could do this, or they could do that, or they could manage this person. We could start this other function. Like, it's quite cool. Like, so we can have a lot of this sort of unstructured discussion time around certain issues that other people would have to book a meeting for, or they'd have to do it a different way, right? Obviously co-founders can go for dinner together and talk about things in an unstructured way, but not at the level that you do if you live with them, is what I would say. Now, obviously that comes with some complications. You need to firewall something. So evenings past a certain time and weekends are just for no work stuff. We just do not talk about work stuff. If one person has, like, accidentally opened their emails and they've spotted something, they do not mention it until Monday morning. Like, it's that sort of stuff that we have to separate and have family time. And we're expecting a new baby in December, so Jess is taking 4 months off. Thank you, mate. Jess is taking 4 months off, so we're having to factor all that in and what that looks like. And I don't know. I think it's brilliant. It is, man. It's wonderful. Brilliant. We get to do all the work travel that everyone glamorizes, where it's actually nonsense. Like, it's actually enjoyable for us because we do it together, and now we're going to do it with the baby. So like, that's actually quite cool. So I'm speaking at a conference in Australia in May.
Wow.
So we're all going over there in May as a family. So it's nice that we get to do all this stuff together. So
look, I think it's fantastic. Cool. I don't know, when people think when couples work together, they've got to fight and all that stuff. I actually think, having observed it, that there's a stronger bond there. There's a stronger motivation. 1 + 1 is not equal to 2 anymore. It's like 4, 16, because for the business to succeed means more. It's not just another business.
Yeah, that's business, so true.
Your co-founder is your wife, and now you've got a family. And because I'm obviously run Moneywise doctor, we talk about tax. We'll never stop thinking about optimizing.
Nice.
Imagine traveling with your family. I'm thinking of it from the point of expensing it as an account expense, and that's totally legal and that's totally fine. Being able to sort of, like, put all that as part of your not work-life balance. I'll call it life-life balance, because I don't really believe in work-life balance. I believe that you do what you've got to do, and then after some time, you have some time to go. This has been all amazing. I don't know, I could talk to you all day, but I've got a bit, because you've got a lot of things to do, obviously, as a CEO of a real company with real people. Now, let's talk about real people, because you guys put out some amazing content. I love health tech podcast, but I also enjoy the format that Health Tech Pigeon comes. I like the pigeon and the originality of, and even biotech dodo. I'm thinking this is out of the world. This is all very original, and it just stands out. So, at what point did you decide, look, I'm going to hire? How many people do you have working with you at the moment, anyway? Just generally.
Depends how you count us, but I'd say I think there's 10 full-time PAYEs, and then there's fractional, like, HR and some of our like, you know, videographers and animators and that side of things. So there's probably about 20 people in and around.
20 people.
10 on PAYE and probably 10 contractors that we consistently work with for various different things.
I'll say
something in that order. You're
punching not punching higher than your weight, but for a small team, I call it small team, big energy.
Yeah, man.
Because nowadays people don't go through. I was saying this on Daniel Presley, his team, when they bought a new company. And nowadays people don't go for. I was talking to an entrepreneur who recently sold this company for about maybe 35 million, and he was less than 30. And nowadays people don't check metrics like IBM. We've got 1,000 employees working here. I think, look, we're a team of 10 full FTE, and then we've got contractors, and look, we're a multi-million-dollar company. That's brilliant. That's amazing. But you must have obviously have thought about it when you were doing your first hire. Did you have any trepidations or thoughts? Well, if you're not able to get enough money?
Of course. Well, firstly, didn't know how to do it. Didn't know what on earth was involved. Because when we started, really, Jess and I just thought we can be freelancers. Really, is what we thought. Like, we can start this. We can pick up clients. We can do some things. And we thought, like, hey, we'll also just pick up a couple of other freelancers to sort of do some of the doing. Yes, we just thought there'd be a couple of other freelancers that work with us maybe, and you know, they take care of some of the doing, and we just thought, yeah, we'll just have like a very nice, very comfortable life doing lifestyle, that, to be honest. I mean, lifestyle business, and that's sort of how it started. But then 2 clients became 4 quite quickly, and then we were like, okay, 4, we need a couple of people to do some stuff, so we got that. And then you're like, well, now my lifestyle's better again because I've got a couple of people doing some stuff. It was like, well, what if one of those clients goes? We'd have to let one of the freelancers go. So what's safer than 4 clients, 5 clients? 5 clients is safer.
Than 10.
And then exactly. And then 6 clients is safer than that. So now you're at 6 clients and you've got 2 freelancers pushing a third. And then you're like, well, actually, these freelancers aren't that bought in. Because I want them to take care of some of the podcast stuff and some of the pigeon stuff, but they need to actually want it and care about it in order to do that. So now I'm like, well, maybe we need like 1 full-time hire, and then so that's how it creeps up. So
very organic.
It is organic, but it's finding, like, when you grow, people talk about sawtooth growth when you grow a bootstrapped company, because you're not having this massive investment. So and then loads of money to spend on loads of hires. What you do is that there are times where you have like lots of revenue, high margin, but then people haven't got much time because all your current people are busy. So then what you do is hire and then drop your margin. So then the graph drops, and then you do the same thing again, repeat. It looks like a sawtooth, right? If you're plotting margin. So people talk about this sawtooth growth, or EBITDA if you're plotting EBITDA. So that's essentially it, and that never, and then basically that never ends. That's like
it's a big challenge of agency business, isn't it? That agency model where you grow, you hire.
This is it. There's a little complex of things, which is sales, hiring, finance, and whatever the other one is, but like all of that, trying to balance those things all together, of like managing the new business pipelines. So you've got new business coming in, but capacity, that's the other one. So you've got to manage the new business pipelines, make sure you've got new ones coming in, but then you've got to manage, are any leaving and what's our net gain, and then if we've got enough capacity for that, if not, we need to hire for it, and then if we need to hire for it, what's our finances doing? So like that is your constant management work, setting up the systems and processes to make sure that none of that falls over. Because if you overhire, or you over commit capacity, or you over whatever, like if you mess up any one of those, the idea is to keep all of those in balance at all times. That's the any agency owner listening will know that that's the thing
that's no easy
constantly
task.
keeps me up at night.
It's not easy task, because you don't want to end up with too much work. You can't execute at the same high quality level you do.
That's exactly right.
You also don't have the luxury. You're not a VC funded company, so you don't have the luxury of hiring people to sit around.
Well, this is it. But you're right with quality, because how does this is it. I didn't mention it there, but you know what you might think, there's not much capacity. That's fine. Everyone's busy, but it's within their hours or whatever. Well, no, because people do end up working extra hours. But also, you're right. Full capacity means less quality. Less quality means less retention of clients. Less capacity also means less retention of staff, because they might want to leave. And so then you're bringing new clients into a broken system. If you bring new clients into a broken system, they're going to bounce straight out.
Wow, thank you so much. This has been so insightful. To be honest, I felt like I've only just scratched the surface. The thing
I can
about
come back on, man. I can come back on. We can chat again.
Absolutely, I think probably get you back again. Maybe when you're now a dad.
Sounds good.
Bring you back.
Sounds good.
It's been amazing. Basically, being able to go down to the nitty gritty, because your podcast is fantastic. But let's face it, you're talking to CEOs, founders, VCs,
Yeah, man.
and they're talking about the next gen in the world. But being able to go down to those beginning times, I think is quite inspiring and insightful for, especially now. I get a lot of doctors who send me messages who are thinking, look, I'm thinking of starting this thing. And you started, I think, probably in your 20s, which is good. I started investing at 19 myself. It's a bit harder when you're in your mid 30s, you've got a mortgage and you've got a baby on the way. So a lot of people reach out and they say, oh, I want to start this thing. But I would borrow from a wise person who said, if you have an idea, one thing you want to start, you want to say, who is it for? Do you recognize those words? Who is it for? What problem does it solve? And how are they going to pay for it? That's the third one that makes it not an NGO, but a real business that can actually grow. So obviously those were your words. Yeah.
I've said that for many years. I've said that for many years. That I have literally said that since my 20s. Yeah.
Oh wow.
If you as a startup can't very quickly in a few words answer what problem do you solve, who do you solve it for, and how they're going to pay for it. Those are the that's it. I used to go around at events and just ask people that all the time.
Wow.
And then say, if you can't articulate that, I can probably give you a hand.
Wow.
So, yeah.
This is all amazing. I mean, obviously, you run SOMX, which now has the newsletter, and you've got like health tech podcast. You've got like health tech pigeon that carries the updated news better on Twitter. And then you've got like you've got biotech dodo. If people were to find you and they wanted to find it, where would be the best place to sort of like go check?
Yeah, man. So if you want to keep in touch with the health tech news, go to healthtechpigeon.com, grab the newsletter, hit your inboxes every Sunday. If you want to do the same for biotech, go to biotechdodo.com. Again, same thing. Health Tech Pigeon's also got a podcast that's like a news panel show. That's new episodes every week. I think they go out on Sundays as well, generally. The Health Tech Podcast, if you go to the healthtechpodcast.com or just search for the Health Tech Podcast wherever you get podcasts, that's where I'm chatting to entrepreneurs about their big ideas and, big thing that they're growing or building to change the world. And yeah, if you're a health tech company or you're a biotech company and you want help with communications, marketing, PR, anything in that constellation of words that all mean the same thing, not quite, but it's easy for people if they do think that. But
a bit nuanced, isn't it?
If you want any advice on that stuff, just give me a shout. Grab me on LinkedIn, James Somauroo.
This has been amazing. I mean, I just thought I might slip in there. You also hold events. I've been to one of your events. So man. And this is not just, you don't just have any odds. Random partners. It was Google actually. I think I attended one on my way back from the US.
Nice.
While I was in London, I might as well just attend before I go back to.
Nice. Well, there's a good story about how they came about, which I'll tell next time I come on.
So if you're listening, this is a good reason to come back. Next time we have James X. Thank you so much. It's been amazing having you. I don't know if you've got any parting words or anything you'd like to say to someone listening.
Well, I just think, look, you probably have a lot of clinicians listen, right? And I think there's a lot of clinicians that I have a lot of sympathy for right now. I think it's a really tough time. It's a really tough time to be a clinician. And I think especially if you're wanting to do different stuff, the competition's really high to get out and do different things. I just think that be led by what you're drawn into rather than what you're being pushed away from. So making sure that you're really following your interests, because the world really is your oyster. You have so many transferable skills. You have so many things that you can do. Just follow what you genuinely are interested in or good at, or both, and really follow that thread and then be pulled into something rather than just getting pushed away into whatever's going to take you next. That would be my advice.
Well, I'm glad I asked that last question because it seems you saved the best for the last. So find your ikigai. What are you drawn into,
Awesome.
rather than what you're running away because you don't like the pay, you don't like the job, but rather your real curiosities. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time and a lot of the insights. And
you're very welcome.
we'll surely get you back
Speak
again.
soon. Yeah, sounds good, man.